Hello and welcome. You think you know the story of the Mad Mage, don't you? You've heard whispers of Undermountain, that sprawling labyrinth of death and madness beneath Waterdeep. And you've heard the names spoken in hushed tones by those who claim to understand the depths. But what if everything you believed about Halaster Blackcloak was merely the surface of a far deeper truth? What if the madness that defines him was not a sudden curse, but a slow transformation that began more than 1,000 years ago, when a young wizard named Hilather first opened his mind to powers that should have remained forever sealed? Tonight, you will descend with me into the true history of the most infamous mage in all the Forgotten Realms. And you will discover that the line between genius and insanity is far thinner than you ever imagined. Before there was Halaster Blackcloak, before the Mad Mage haunted the depths beneath Mount Waterdeep, there was simply Hilather. This is the name he carried in his youth, more than 1,000 years before the current age, and it is a name that has been all but erased from history. You search the ancient texts, and you find only speculation about where this young man spent his formative years. Some scholars have proposed a connection to the ancient Imaskari Empire, that godless realm of powerful wizard rulers centered in what is now the Roaran Desert, based on fragmentary evidence suggesting Roranee's origins. This empire, which thrived from approximately 8350 Dale reckoning until its catastrophic destruction, was known for producing some of the most formidable arcane practitioners the world had ever seen. The Imaskari artificers wielded magic that could tear people from other worlds, enslaving entire populations with their god-defying power. If Hilather truly walked among these wizard lords, if he learned his earliest incantations in the shadow of their greatness, then his later descent into obsession and madness might be seen as an echo of Imaskar's own hubris. But this connection to Imaskar remains unconfirmed, a theory pieced together from fragmentary evidence and the few clues that hint at Hilather's possible Roranese heritage. What the historical record does confirm is that wherever Hilather began his journey, he started as something radically different from the creature he would become. In those early centuries, Hilather was gregarious, social, even generous with his knowledge. He did not hide away in dark towers or delve into forbidden depths. Instead, he created mage fairs, those grand gatherings where practitioners of the art could display their innovations and compete in friendly rivalry. He hosted spellmoots, convening councils of wizards to discuss theory, share discoveries, and advance the boundaries of magical understanding. And most tellingly, he took many apprentices, sharing his growing power with those who showed promise and dedication. You see him in your mind's eye, this younger version of the man who would become legend, walking among his peers with confidence and charm, his robes unstained by the darkness that would later define him. He is ambitious, yes, but his ambition is tempered by genuine curiosity and a desire to build something lasting. He wants to leave a legacy not of fear, but of advancement, of magical knowledge pushed to new horizons. For years, perhaps even centuries, this is who Hilather is. A respected archmage, powerful, but not yet consumed by the forces he would eventually unleash. But power, you understand, has a way of changing those who wield it. As Hilather's abilities grew, as he mastered circles of magic that lesser wizards could barely comprehend, his interests began to shift in troubling directions. He became fascinated with aberrations, those creatures that defy natural law, entities born from realms where reality itself bends and breaks. Where other mages might study elementals or fae, Hilather turned his attention to beholders and mind flayers, to things that crawled from the far realm with geometries that hurt to perceive. This was not idle curiosity. This was obsession beginning to take root. Alongside his interest in aberrations came an equally consuming fascination with the outer planes. Hilather began to explore those dimensions beyond the material world, realms of pure concept and raw magical energy. He summoned outsiders, binding demons and devils to his will, conversing with celestials and fiends, alike to extract their knowledge of planar mechanics and extraplanar power. Each summoning, each conversation with entities whose minds worked in fundamentally alien ways, left its mark on him. You cannot commune with the far realm without the far realm communing back. You cannot stare into that abyss of impossible angles and non-Euclidean horrors without feeling it stare into you in return. With these new interests came new behaviors. Hilather, once so open and collaborative, began to exhibit paranoia. He grew suspicious of his fellow archmages, seeing rivals where once there had been colleagues, perceiving threats in innocent questions and casual observations. His generosity curdled into possessiveness. The knowledge he had once shared freely became secrets to be hoarded, guarded with increasingly elaborate wards and contingencies. And perhaps most disturbing, his demeanor shifted from scholarly curiosity to something darker, something vicious. Those who displeased him or questioned his methods found themselves on the receiving end of curses and hexes. Apprentices who failed to meet his escalating standards simply disappeared, their fates unrecorded and unlamented. You must understand that this transformation did not happen overnight. It was not a sudden curse or a single traumatic event that shattered Hilather's mind and remade him as Halaster the Mad. Instead, it was erosion, a slow wearing away of sanity and humanity across decades, or even centuries of exposure to forces that mortal minds were never meant to comprehend. Each aberration studied left its psychic residue. Each planar journey brought back contamination from dimensions where thoughts became reality, and reality dissolved into nightmare. The pattern suggests that Hilather was changing, cell by cell, thought by thought, becoming something more and something less than the man he had been. By the time Hilather made his fateful decision to seek out Mount Waterdeep, he was already well along the path to madness. The historical record shows that in 168 Dale Reckoning, a wizard calling himself Halaster Blackcloak arrived at the foot of that mountain with 6 of his favored apprentices. Note the change in name. Hilather had become Halaster. The gregarious archmage who hosted Spellmoots had adopted a new identity, one that spoke of darkness and concealment. This was not mere rebranding. This was a statement of transformation, an acknowledgement that whoever Hilather had been, that person was gone, replaced by something altogether different. But why Mount Waterdeep? Why did Halaster choose this specific location for whatever dark work he intended to undertake? The answer lies deep beneath the mountain, in tunnels and chambers that predate even the ancient Netherese. Halaster knew, through means that remain unclear, about the Sargoth Enclave, an abandoned Netherese outpost buried in the vast network of caverns beneath Mount Waterdeep. The Netherese, those flying city builders who had mastered magic in ways that would not be seen again for thousands of years, had established this outpost for reasons of their own. By 168 Dale Reckoning, the enclave had been abandoned for centuries, but its Netherese architecture remained, along with whatever magical secrets the arcanists of that fallen empire had left behind. The presence of this Netherese outpost offers a logical explanation for Halaster's choice. The lure that drew him across whatever distances separated his previous life from this new beginning. But there may have been something more, something that called to him in dreams or visions, though such possibilities venture beyond what the historical record can confirm. What you can know with certainty is that when Halaster arrived at Mount Waterdeep, he came with purpose and with power, ready to claim the depths as his own domain. The 6 apprentices who accompanied him would later be joined by a 7th, forming the group known simply as the 7. These were not ordinary students. These were powerful mages in their own right, wizards who had learned at Halaster's feet and survived his increasingly demanding tutelage. Their names would become legend in their own right. Archeria, Jessiira Kestelharp, Muriel, Nestor, Marambra Nitsteel, Rantanter, and Trabriand. Each brought unique specializations and abilities. Each would play a role in the transformation of the caverns beneath Mount Waterdeep into the deadliest dungeon ever conceived. But in 168 Dale Reckoning, as they stood at the foot of the mountain with their master, they could not have known what they were truly beginning, could not have foreseen that their descent into those depths would be a descent into nightmare from which most of them would never truly return. Halaster's first act upon arriving at Mount Waterdeep was to establish his surface presence, a tower that would serve as both fortress and declaration. But Halaster did not construct this tower through conventional means, did not hire masons or laborers to raise stone upon stone through months or years of ordinary effort. Instead, he did what he had become accustomed to doing. He reached beyond the material plane and seized the beings he required. Halaster summoned demons pulling them screaming from the abyss, binding them with circles of power and compelling words. He called forth devils from the 9 hells, trapping infernal intelligences in mortal service. He reached into other outer planes, drawing elementals and stranger entities, outsiders whose very presence warped local reality. These beings, bound against their will, became Halaster's construction crew, raising Halaster's hold with supernatural speed and otherworldly craftsmanship. You imagine the sight. Demons hauling massive stone blocks with strength no human could match. Devils inscribing wards and runes with infernal precision. Elementals shaping earth and stone with gestures. All while Halaster stood at the center, conducting this symphony of subjugated power with cold authority. When the hold was complete, Halaster declared the surrounding lands as his own. This was a bold claim, perhaps even an arrogant one, for the area around Mount Waterdeep was not empty wilderness. Barbarian tribes roamed these lands, and beneath the surface, in the extensive cave systems and tunnels, dwelt both drow and duergar. But Halaster had not come to negotiate or to share. He had come to dominate, to carve out a domain where his word would be absolute law. And here Halaster made a decision that revealed just how far he had traveled from the man he once was. When conventional masters completed construction projects, they released their summoned servants, sending demons back to the abyss, returning outsiders to their home planes. Halaster did not. He refused to release the monsters and demons he had summoned. Instead, he sent them into the caverns beneath his hold, ordering them to explore the deep places, to map the tunnels, to be his eyes and claws in the darkness below. This marked the beginning of what would become known as Halaster's hunts, a long and brutal campaign to drive out the previous inhabitants of these subterranean realms and claim every tunnel, every chamber, every shadow as his own. The drow had established themselves in portions of the cavern network, creating outposts and training grounds in the eternal darkness. These dark elves, exiled from the surface world and devoted to their spider goddess, were formidable opponents, masters of stealth and dark magic. But Halaster was relentless. His bound demons swept through drow encampments, overwhelming defenders with infernal fury. His summoned aberrations hunted through passages where even drow feared to tread, and Halaster himself stalked the depths, wielding magic that made even the priestesses of Lolt hesitate. The drow who survived Halaster's initial onslaught found themselves facing a fate arguably worse than death. Halaster did not simply kill them. He trapped their souls, imprisoning the essence of dark elf warriors and priestesses for use in his dark magical experiments. Others he twisted, transforming their bodies and enslaving their minds, turning proud drow into mindless servitors, or warping them into new and terrible forms. By the time Halaster was finished with the drow presence beneath Mount Waterdeep, those who had not been killed or enslaved had fled deeper into the Underdark. carrying tales of the Mad Mage's power to their kin in distant cities. The Duergar, those grey dwarves who had once mined mithril from these tunnels, received similar treatment. Halaster drove them out systematically, level by level, tunnel by tunnel. The mithril veins had already run dry by this time, giving the Duergar less reason to fight for territory that no longer held the riches they sought. Even so, the grey dwarves did not depart willingly. Halaster's demons and summoned horrors had to pry them from their last strongholds, chasing them through collapsed mining galleries and abandoned foundries, until the Duergar presence was entirely eliminated. By 309 Dale reckoning, more than 140 years after first arriving at Mount Waterdeep, Halaster had achieved complete control over the near-endless tunnels and caverns beneath the mountain. The hunts were over. The drow were gone. The Duergar were driven out. The various monsters that had made these depths their home had been killed, enslaved, or scattered. Halaster stood as undisputed master of a subterranean realm so vast that no single person could hope to map all its passages in a lifetime. And it was then, with the conquest complete, that Halaster began his true work. The descent of his apprentices followed in 307 Dale reckoning, and together they started the construction that would transform these natural caverns into Undermountain. Section 2. The Arrival and the Seven. 307 Dale reckoning marked the true beginning of what would become the legend of Undermountain. By this time, Halaster had spent nearly 140 years consolidating his power, driving out the drow and Duergar, exploring every natural cavern, and mapping every tunnel. His hold on the surface had fallen into ruin, abandoned by its master, who no longer had any interest in the world above. The barbarian tribes who roamed the area spoke of Blackcloak, hold as cursed, a place where demons still walked and strange lights flickered in broken windows. But Halaster cared nothing for his former tower. His attention had turned entirely downward into the depths, where secrets older than empires waited to be uncovered. It was in this year that the Seven made their descent. Halaster's apprentices, who had lived in the towers surrounding his hold, training and studying, while their master pursued his increasingly obsessive research below, finally received permission to join him in the depths. Or perhaps it was not permission at all. Perhaps it was a summons, a command from a master who no longer asked but demanded. Whatever the truth, the Seven descended together into what would become their eternal home. Archria, Jessiira Kestelharp, Muriel, Nestor, Marambra Nitsteel, Rantenter, and Trabriand. Each would establish their own holdings in the vast underground complex. Each would pursue their own specializations and obsessions, and most would never again see the sun. Archria, you understand, was perhaps the most gifted of them all. She specialized in transmutation magic, the art of changing one thing into another, of reshaping reality at its most fundamental level. where other wizards might use transmutation to turn lead into gold or stone into flesh, Archeria's ambitions ran deeper and darker. She saw the body itself as merely raw material, something to be reshaped and improved according to her vision. This philosophy would drive her to extremes that even her fellow apprentices found disturbing. First, she transformed herself into a lick, binding her soul to a phylactery and achieving freedom from aging and death. But undeath was merely the beginning for Archeria. She then gave herself butterfly wings, great gossamer appendages that allowed her to fly through her laboratories with ethereal grace. This transformation into something half fae, half undead was just one of many changes she would inflict upon herself over the centuries. By the time of the current era, Archeria had become what is known as a worm that walks. Her physical form entirely consumed and replaced by a colony of maggots and worms that somehow maintained her consciousness and magical power. She resides on the 23rd level of Undermountain, in a place called Archeriadum, where she continues her cruel experiments with polymorphing magic, reshaping unwilling subjects according to her whims. Of all the seven, she may be the most powerful, and certainly the most alien, having transformed herself so completely that calling her human would be a mockery of the term. Jessiira Kestelharp was not a wizard like the others, but a sorceress, wielding innate magical power that flowed through her blood rather than being learned from books and study. Her specialization and her fate would become intertwined in ways that defy easy explanation. At some point in the long centuries of her imprisonment in Undermountain, Jessiira attempted to escape from Halaster, using a method so desperate and innovative that it speaks to both her brilliance and her desperation. She transformed herself into a living wish spell, becoming magic incarnate. Her consciousness merged with one of the most powerful incantations known to wizardkind. But Halaster, ever vigilant and impossibly powerful, dragged her back into Undermountain before she could complete her escape. The transformation left her changed, driven half-mad by existing as both person and spell simultaneously. In the current era, she rules over other living spells in Undermountain's citadel of the Bloody Hand, commanding an army of sentient incantations that Halaster forced her to create. Whether she is truly aware of changes in the outside world, whether she knows of Halaster's own death and resurrection during the Spellplague, remains uncertain. She exists in a state between reality and magic itself, trapped in a prison partly of Halaster's making and partly of her own. Trabriand earned the title of Metal Mage through his singular gift for creating constructs. Where other wizards might animate a golem or two, Trabriand developed entirely new varieties of magical automatons. He created Faragons, Scaladars, Silverans, and Thanators, each a unique construction of metal and magic designed for specific purposes. His creations were feared throughout Undermountain and beyond, for Trabriand did not hoard his inventions. He sold his metal guardians to other mages, to creatures of the Underdark, to anyone willing to meet his price. This commerce made him wealthy and gave him resources to pursue ever more ambitious projects. In his pursuit of immortality, Trobriand chose not undeath like Archeria, but rather sought eternity through his creations. He reasoned that if his constructs persisted after his death, then in some sense he would persist as well. In the modern era, Trobriand serves as the true leader of Halaster's heirs, training newly recruited apprentices with a deft touch that keeps the various factions from destroying each other. Of all the seven, he may be the most sane, the one whose mind has been least warped by centuries in the depths. Though sane is a relative term when speaking of Halaster's students. Neural the Misshapen occupies a unique position among the seven, for he was not originally an apprentice at all. When Halaster first arrived at Mount Waterdeep, Neural served as his bodyguard, a warrior of exceptional skill who protected the wizard while he conducted his research and rituals. Neural was not learned in magic, did not study spellbooks or practice incantations. He was a fighter, pure and simple, the sword that defended Halaster from physical threats. But as the years passed, and Halaster descended deeper into obsession and madness, Neural began to study magic alongside the other apprentices. Perhaps he saw that physical strength alone would not be enough to survive in the depths Halaster was creating. Perhaps he simply craved the power he saw wielded by those around him. Whatever his motivation, Neural began to learn the art, and with Halaster's blessing and Archeria's guidance, he used transmutation magic to reshape his own body. The transformation was not forced upon him, but self-inflicted, a conscious choice to become something other than human. He became the Misshapen, his form twisted and augmented in ways that made him more fearsome, better able to perform the violent work Halaster required. The exact nature of his current form and his fate varies across different accounts. But what remains consistent is that Neural chose monstrosity, embraced it, made himself into something that could survive and thrive in Undermountain's most dangerous levels. Marambra Nitsteel specialized in evocation, the school of magic concerned with pure destructive force, where transmuters reshaped reality and necromancers manipulated life and death. Evokers channeled raw energy into devastating spells of fire, lightning, and force. Marambra would have been a formidable combatant, capable of obliterating enemies with word and gesture. But her fate among the seven remains the most unclear. Some accounts suggest that she was one of 2 apprentices killed during the early days of Halaster's conquest of Undermountain, slain in the battles against Drow or by Halaster's own hand. Other sources hint that she was tortured repeatedly by Halaster, subjected to experiments so brutal that she eventually escaped, but had to destroy portions of her own mind to achieve freedom. There are even theories that she transformed herself into pure energy, becoming a being of living evocation magic that could move freely through Undermountain's levels. The truth of Marambra's fate is lost to time, one of the many mysteries that Undermountain refuses to reveal. Of Nestor and Rantanter, even less is known. They are named among the seven. Their presence at the 307 Dale Reckoning descent is documented. But the historical record falls silent regarding their specializations, their holdings within Undermountain, and their ultimate fates. This silence could indicate several possibilities. They may have been among the apprentices who died early, killed by Halaster when they returned to search for him after his long absence. They may have escaped, fleeing Undermountain and changing their names to hide from their former master. Or they remain somewhere in the depths even now, on levels so deep or so isolated that no adventurer has yet discovered their lairs. The absence of information is frustrating for historians, but entirely fitting for Undermountain itself, a place where secrets go to multiply in the dark. With the seven established in their holdings, Halaster set about expanding his underground domain with systematic thoroughness. He enlisted his apprentices' aid in fortifying the dungeon, in creating new levels, and establishing the elaborate trap systems that would make Undermountain legendary. What happened during this period of construction remains unclear, shrouded in contradictory accounts and deliberate obfuscation. What you do know is that by the time this phase ended, only one apprentice is confirmed to have escaped Undermountain entirely. She fled the area and never returned, taking whatever knowledge she possessed of Halaster's plans into self-imposed exile. Whether the others died, chose to remain, or were prevented from leaving, the result was the same. The seven became prisoners of their own master's creation, each ruling their own section of the vast dungeon, while ultimately serving Halaster's inscrutable purposes. But Halaster was not done gathering apprentices. In 1148 Dale Reckoning, more than 800 years after the original seven descended, a Netherese necromancer named Shradden Mullafer came to Halaster with a petition. Shradden was ancient even then, having survived the destruction of Netheril itself through necromantic rituals that granted him a form of immortality. He had learned of the Sargoth Enclave, that abandoned Netherese outpost buried in Undermountain's depths, and he wished to claim it for himself. The audacity of this request was remarkable. To approach the Mad Mage, to ask him for territory within his jealously guarded domain, required either extraordinary courage or extraordinary foolishness. Halaster agreed, for reasons that perhaps even the Mad Mage himself could not fully articulate. He granted Shradden's petition and allowed the necromancer to take the enclave as his own holding. Perhaps Halaster saw value in having another powerful wizard within Undermountain, someone who could serve as a buffer between his deepest sanctums and the outside world. Perhaps he simply found Shradden's audacity amusing, or perhaps, in his madness, Halaster acted without any reason at all, making a decision based on whim or impulse rather than calculation. Shradden wasted no time in establishing his domain. Calling himself the Lord of Bones, a title he chose deliberately despite knowing it was also used by Miakul, the god of death. Shradden transformed the abandoned Sargoth enclave into Skullport. This new settlement would serve as a neutral way station in the Underdark, a place where surface dwellers and Underdark denizens could conduct commerce away from the laws and restrictions of legitimate cities. Shradden forged a pact with the skulls of Skullport, mysterious, sentient, undead remnants of the Netherese wizards, who had originally established the enclave. These skulls, trapped in their ancient prison for millennia, agreed to maintain order in Skullport because Shradden's plans aligned with their own schemes to eventually escape. The creation of Skullport permanently linked Undermountain to the greater Underdark, creating a gateway through which goods, creatures, and secrets could flow in both directions. Surface merchants seeking exotic goods traveled down to the Port of Shadow. Drow and Duergar, mind flayers and beholders, all found their way to Skullport's markets, and through it all, Halaster watched, allowing this hub of commerce and villainy to exist within his domain. Perhaps because it brought him valuable resources and information. Perhaps because he simply did not care what happened in portions of Undermountain he considered unimportant. Shradden would rule Skullport for more than 2 centuries, maintaining his position through necromantic power and careful political maneuvering. But his fate was ultimately tied to Halaster's own. And when the Mad Mage was kidnapped by the Twisted Rune in 1369 Dale Reckoning, the wards protecting Undermountain faltered. The skulls struck immediately, transforming Shradden into a Nishru, a creature that feeds on magic itself. This transformation was meant to let Shradden drain energy from Skullport's magical infrastructure to feed the skull's own plans. Shradden would eventually die in his transformed state, though a clone of him persists in the modern era, largely retreating within his manse and exercising little actual authority over the Port of Shadow he once commanded. By the middle of Undermountain's history, the structure of the Mad Domain was largely established. Halaster ruled from the depths, venturing to distant plains and bringing back strange creatures to populate his dungeons. The surviving apprentices maintained their holdings, pursuing their own obsessions while ultimately serving their master's will. Skullport provided connection to the wider Underdark and a source of resources, and adventurers, drawn by tales of treasure and power, began to descend into the upper levels, testing themselves against Halaster's traps and guardians. The Mad Mage welcomed these intruders, for they provided entertainment and test subjects, fresh material for experiments and diversions from the long centuries of isolation. Undermountain had become what Halaster intended: a living laboratory, a prison, a playground, and a testament to one wizard's descent into madness and power. But the true depth of what Halaster had created, the secret at the heart of Undermountain, would not be revealed for centuries more. Section 3. The Knot in the Weave and Descent into Madness. 326 Dale Reckoning stands as perhaps the most significant year in Undermountain's history, though few scholars recognize it as such. By this time, Halaster had been delving beneath Mount Waterdeep for more than 150 years, exploring every natural cavern, mapping forgotten Netherese halls, and constructing his own additions to the vast subterranean complex. He had driven out the drow and duergar, established his apprentices in their holdings, and created a dungeon unlike any other in the world. But in 326 Dale Reckoning, Halaster discovered something that would transform him utterly, binding his soul to Undermountain and completing his descent from Hilather, the gregarious archmage, into Halaster, the utterly, irrevocably mad. He found the knot in the weave. You must understand what this means, what the knot truly is, to comprehend the depths of what happened to Halaster in the centuries that followed. The weave, that invisible force that permeates all of existence, is the conduit through which spellcasters channel their power. It flows through reality like threads in a grand cosmic fabric, predictable and reliable for those who study it, allowing magic to shape the world in consistent and understandable ways. But beneath Mount Waterdeep, deep in the heart of what would become Undermountain, the weave was not predictable or reliable. It was wounded, damaged, twisted into a configuration that should not exist. The origins of this wound stretch back to the reign of Hilather, the ancient elven kingdom that once stood where Waterdeep now rises. When the elves abandoned their capital city, they did not simply depart and leave their structures to decay like ordinary ruins. Instead, they employed magic of staggering power to erase all traces of their presence, to remove their buildings and monuments so completely that future generations would find no evidence that Hilather had ever existed. This was magic on a scale rarely attempted, reality-altering sorcery that required the combined efforts of their greatest archmages. The ritual succeeded after a fashion. The city vanished, erased from physical existence, but magic of such magnitude does not come without cost. The erasure spell tore through the weave itself, creating a permanent wound in the fabric of magic. Where the ritual was completed, deep beneath the surface, the weave tried to heal itself, tried to reconnect the severed strands and restore the flow of magical energy, but something went wrong in that healing process. The threads tangled as they reconnected, creating a permanent knot, a place where magical energy no longer flowed smoothly, but instead churned and roiled in chaotic patterns. For centuries, this knot remained dormant, a sleeping wound in reality. The dwarves of Clan Mellerkin, who would later establish extensive mining operations in these mountains, felt its effects, with many falling victim to an unexplained obsession that drew them deeper into the tunnels. when Halaster arrived at Mount Waterdeep in 168 Dale Reckoning. The presence of the knot beneath the mountain may well have been what drew him there in the first place. His stated interest was the Sargoth Enclave, the abandoned Netherese outpost that promised ancient magical secrets. But as he delved deeper, as he explored levels beneath even the Netherese ruins, he encountered the knot directly, and unlike the dwarves or the drow who had passed near it without understanding what they sensed, Halaster recognized it for what it was: a fundamental distortion in the weave itself, a source of chaotic magical power, unlike anything he had encountered in all his centuries of study. The discovery obsessed him. Here was magic that operated outside normal rules, energy that flowed in impossible patterns, a wound in reality that might offer insights into the fundamental nature of existence itself. Halaster began to study the knot with single-minded intensity, spending years, then decades, then centuries trying to understand its properties and harness its power. What he failed to realize, or perhaps could not realize as his madness deepened, was that the knot was changing him in return. What happened next remains documented in the observable effects, but debated in interpretation. The knot's influence on mortal minds is well-established fact. Prolonged proximity causes madness in mortal beings, confirmed by observations of Halaster, his apprentices, and even Durnan, the proprietor of the Yawning Portal, all of whom exhibit symptoms consistent with exposure. The madness does not manifest as simple insanity or random behavior. Instead, it creates an obsession with Undermountain itself, a subconscious compulsion to remain in or near the dungeon, to expand it, to defend it, to make it the center of one's entire existence. Those affected are often unaware that anything is wrong, convinced that their obsession is purely their own choice rather than the result of magical influence. The nature of the knot itself, however, invites different interpretations. Some scholars maintain that the knot is simply a magical anomaly, that its effects on Halaster's mind were the inevitable result of prolonged exposure to chaotic energies that mortal minds were never meant to process. According to this view, Halaster's madness is purely a consequence of his own choices, the price he paid for studying forces beyond his comprehension. Yet other theories present a more disturbing possibility. The pattern of the knots affects the way it draws beings to it, the specific nature of the obsession it creates, the manner in which it seems to use those it affects to expand and protect Undermountain could suggest something more purposeful. If the knot gained some form of awareness over the millennia it spent trapped beneath the earth, it would explain why it appears to compel its victims toward actions that serve its preservation and growth. In this interpretation, Halaster may have been shaped into a tool, used to build Undermountain as a physical manifestation of the knot's influence. Whether this represents true sentience or simply the mechanical function of a wounded section of the weave-following patterns of self-preservation remains a matter of scholarly debate. What cannot be disputed is how the knot affected Halaster over the centuries that followed, as he poured his magic into transforming the natural caverns and Nethery's ruins into Undermountain. As he summoned endless creatures from other planes to populate his dungeon. As he created traps and wards and elaborate magical systems throughout the complex. The chaotic magical energy of the knot bound his soul to the dungeon itself. The connection grew so profound that Halaster and Undermountain became increasingly inseparable. The dungeon began to reflect his fracturing mind, becoming a maze of contradictions and impossibilities, while his thoughts twisted into patterns that resembled Undermountain's endless tunnels. This binding of soul to place granted Halaster abilities that other archmages could only dream of achieving. Within Undermountain, he became something more than mortal, his awareness extending throughout the entire complex, his power amplified by direct access to the knot's chaotic energy. He could sense intruders the moment they entered his domain, observe them through scrying pools and magical sensors scattered throughout the levels. He could manipulate the dungeon's structure, opening and closing passages, activating traps from across vast distances, summoning defenders to threatened areas with a thought. Through his connection to the knot, Halaster gained the ability to tap directly into its power, working feats of sorcery that should have been impossible. He created gates that connected to hundreds of different planes, established permanent portals that linked disparate sections of Undermountain, even manipulated the fundamental structure of the dungeon in ways that defied normal magical limitations. But this power came at a price that Halaster could not escape. His madness deepened, his sanity eroding not through a single catastrophic event, but through slow, relentless exposure to forces that mortal minds cannot process. The gregarious archmage who once hosted spellmoots and trained apprentices with genuine care was gone, replaced by something that wore Halaster's face, but thought in patterns human minds were never meant to follow. He became unpredictable, liable to help adventurers one moment and attack them the next, to carefully preserve certain creatures while casually destroying others, to pursue goals that made sense only to his fractured consciousness. Some of his apprentices fell victim to the knot's influence as well, though most to a lesser degree than Halaster himself. The depth and duration of exposure seemed to determine the severity of effects. Those who remained in the upper levels, or who ventured to the surface, regularly maintained more of their original personalities, while those who delved deepest alongside their master succumbed more completely to the obsession. This pattern helps explain the divergent fates of the seven, why some eventually tried to escape, while others embraced their imprisonment, transforming themselves into liches or living spells or stranger things in order to survive eternally in Undermountain's depths. Halaster's magical abilities, already formidable before he discovered the knot, grew to legendary proportions over the centuries. He mastered gate magic, becoming perhaps the greatest expert on planar travel the world had ever seen, where other wizards might struggle to open a single stable portal to another plane. Halaster created permanent gates by the dozens, then by the hundreds, linking Undermountain to the abyss, the 9 hells, the elemental planes, the far realm, and dimensions whose names were unknown even to scholars of the outer planes. These gates allowed him to populate Undermountain with creatures from across the multiverse, creating an environment where demons fought devils, where mind flayers hunted alongside beholders, where the normal rules of ecology and territorial behavior simply did not apply. His skill with summoning and binding magic reached heights that bordered on the divine. Halaster could call forth beings of immense power and force them to serve him, could trap greater fiends in permanent service, could bend even the will of entities that should have been beyond mortal control. The combination of his centuries of accumulated knowledge and his direct access to the knot's power placed him in a category beyond ordinary archmages. Some whispered that he had learned secrets from the Netherese ruins, ancient binding rituals developed by the Flying City arcanists. Others recognized that the knot granted him access to forms of magic that simply did not exist for other spellcasters, that his proximity to the wound in the weave allowed him to work wonders that violated the normal limitations of mortal sorcery. Perhaps his most disturbing achievement was his mastery of clone magic. Halaster created dozens, perhaps hundreds of clone bodies, storing them throughout Undermountain in hidden chambers, protected by the most elaborate wards he could devise. When his current body was killed, whether by adventurers, rival wizards, or simply the hazards of his own experiments, his consciousness would transfer to one of these clones, allowing him to return to life with all his memories intact. This made him functionally immortal within Undermountain, able to take risks that would be suicidal for any other wizard, secure in the knowledge that death was merely an inconvenience rather than an end. Some of his clones were perfect duplicates, identical to his original form in every way. Others he modified, creating versions of himself adapted for specific purposes, bodies that could survive in planar environments that would destroy a normal human, forms that possessed specialized abilities or resistances. The sheer number of these backup bodies speaks to the depth of Halaster's paranoia and his determination to survive at any cost. His relationship with the weave itself evolved into something unique among mortal spellcasters. Halaster was never a chosen of Mystra, never received the goddess's blessing, or became one of her favored servants. The chosen were mortals who worked with the weave, who channeled Mistra's power in accordance with her will. Halaster did something different. He imposed himself on the weave through the knot, forcing his will upon magical energy through sheer power and knowledge, bending it to his purposes, whether the goddess approved or not. Within Undermountain, where the knot distorted normal magical flow, Halaster became the de facto authority on how magic functioned. His understanding and control so complete that he could suppress other spellcasters' abilities, alter the effects of their spells, or even sever their connection to the weave temporarily. This ability to manipulate magic itself within his domain made Halaster nearly undefeatable in direct combat while he remained in Undermountain. Adventurers who faced him discovered that their carefully prepared spells sometimes failed for no apparent reason, that their magical items ceased functioning at crucial moments. That reality itself seemed to bend toward Halaster's advantage. He could teleport freely throughout the dungeon despite wards that prevented others from using such magic. He could see through illusions and invisibility with perfect clarity. He could counterspell with such speed and precision that enemies often found themselves unable to complete even a single incantation before he disrupted it. Yet for all his power, Halaster remained trapped by his own obsession. The knot that granted him such abilities also bound him to Undermountain, creating a compulsion so strong that leaving for extended periods became psychologically impossible. When he did venture to the surface or travel to other planes, he always returned, drawn back by the subconscious need to remain near the source of his power and his madness. He was simultaneously Undermountain's master and its greatest prisoner, ruling over a domain that was also his cage, wielding power that came at the cost of his freedom and his sanity. And deep beneath the mountain, in chambers so far down that sunlight had never reached them, the knot continued to pulse with chaotic energy, twisting the weave into impossible configurations. Whether it possessed awareness or simply functioned according to the blind mechanics of a wounded cosmos, it continued to call to those sensitive enough to hear it, drawing them deeper, binding them tighter, ensuring that Undermountain would never lack for guardians or victims. Halaster studied it still, after more than 1,000 years of observation, convinced that he was on the verge of understanding its deepest secrets, unable or unwilling to see that the knot had already claimed him completely, body and soul, transforming him into an eternal part of the mad dungeon he believed he controlled. Section 4. The Undermountain Era and Conflicts. As Undermountain grew into the deadliest dungeon in all Faerun, the city of Waterdeep rose above it, transforming from scattered settlements into one of the greatest metropolises the world had ever known. The relationship between city and dungeon, between the surface dwellers and the Mad Mage who lurked beneath their feet, was complex and ever-shifting. Halaster was not a hermit who completely withdrew from the world above. He ventured to the surface periodically, appearing in Waterdeep streets or in the wild lands surrounding the city, pursuing goals that made sense only to his fractured mind. Sometimes he seemed almost benign, helping lost travelers or sharing cryptic warnings about future dangers. other times, he was actively malevolent, kidnapping citizens for his experiments, or unleashing monsters from Undermountain to terrorize the countryside. The lords of Waterdeep, that secretive council that governed the city, maintained an uneasy truce with Halaster for centuries. They recognized that the Mad Mage was far too powerful to be removed by force, that any attempt to attack him directly would likely result in catastrophic retaliation. The pragmatic calculation seems clear enough. Better to coexist with a dangerous, but largely containment-focused wizard than to provoke a conflict that could destroy the city itself. Instead, they adopted a policy of containment and occasional negotiation, seeking to minimize Halaster's impact on the city, while accepting that Undermountain and its master were permanent features of Waterdeep's existence. When adventurers descended into the dungeons seeking fortune and glory, the lords did not prevent them. Indeed, these treasure seekers served a useful purpose, occupying Halaster's attention and providing him with the entertainment and test subjects he craved, thereby reducing his need to venture to the surface. The Yawning Portal, that famous tavern built around a great shaft leading down into Undermountain's uppermost levels, became the primary interface between city and dungeon. Durnan, its proprietor, was himself touched by the knot's madness, compelled to remain near Undermountain despite having accumulated enough wealth to retire anywhere in the world. His centuries-long presence at the Yawning Portal, barely aging, always watching as adventurers descended and occasionally returned, demonstrates the same obsessive pull that bound Halaster himself. Whether Durnan was fully aware of this compulsion remains unclear from the historical record, but the pattern of his behavior aligns precisely with documented effects of prolonged knot exposure. But Waterdeep was not the only power that took interest in the Mad Mage and his domain. Throughout the centuries, various organizations and individuals attempted to exploit Halaster's knowledge, to steal his secrets, or to use him as a tool for their own purposes. Most of these attempts ended in spectacular failure, with the would-be manipulators destroyed by Halaster's wrath, or lost forever in Undermountain's endless passages. But in 1369 Dale Reckoning, one group succeeded where countless others had failed. The Twisted Rune, a secret society of undead arcanists who manipulated events across Faerun from hidden strongholds, managed to kidnap Halaster Blackcloak. This achievement was staggering in its audacity and execution. The Twisted Rune had to penetrate Undermountain's defenses, locate Halaster among the dungeon's countless levels, and somehow capture a wizard whose power rivaled that of gods, all without triggering the countless contingencies and fail-safes the Mad Mage had established over more than 1,000 years. The exact method they used remains unclear, lost to secrecy and the chaos that followed. But they succeeded in removing Halaster from Undermountain and imprisoning him in their hidden fortress of Stardock. Their goal was not to kill Halaster, but to extract knowledge from him. The Twisted Rune, particularly a Lich named Priamun Rakisk, who led the operation, sought Halaster's mastery of gate magic, his understanding of planar travel that surpassed even the knowledge possessed by the undead arcanists. They believed they could break the Mad Mage's will, force him to reveal his secrets through torture or magical compulsion, and add his centuries of research to their own dark libraries. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Halaster's kidnapping triggered immediate and devastating consequences. Without the Mad Mage's constant presence and control, Undermountain began to destabilize in ways that threatened not just Waterdeep, but the entire region. The gates that Halaster had so carefully maintained, portals that connected to hundreds of different planes and dimensions, began to malfunction. Creatures from Undermountain were randomly transported to locations throughout Faerun, appearing in cities and villages with no warning. Demons materialized in marketplaces. Beholders emerged in noble estates. Mind flayers found themselves transported to remote farmsteads, confused and murderously angry at their displacement. The chaos was not limited to creature transport. Magical energies that Halaster had kept carefully balanced began to run wild, causing unpredictable surges and dead zones throughout the region. Spells failed without warning. Magical items ceased functioning or exploded with stored energy. Reality itself seemed to fray at the edges, as if Undermountain's madness was spreading outward, infecting the world above with the same chaos that defined the dungeon's depths. This widespread destabilization strongly suggests that Halaster's connection to Undermountain ran deeper than simple ownership, that he had become integral to the dungeon's basic functioning. The lords of Waterdeep, facing a crisis unlike any in the city's history, hired a group of adventurers to investigate. These heroes, whose names have sadly been lost to history or deliberately obscured, managed to track the source of the chaos to Stardock and the Twisted Rune. The battle that followed was legendary, with the adventurers fighting through layers of undead guardians and arcane defenses to reach the chamber where Halaster was imprisoned. When they finally freed the Mad Mage, breaking whatever bindings the Twisted Rune had placed upon him, Halaster immediately teleported back to Undermountain. His return stabilized the dungeon almost instantly. The rampaging gates ceased their random activations. The magical chaos subsided. Creatures stopped appearing in distant cities. It was as if Undermountain itself had been holding its breath during Halaster's absence, and could finally exhale with its master returned. The immediate restoration of order upon Halaster's return provides further evidence of the profound link between wizard and dungeon, supporting the theory that they had become functionally inseparable. But Halaster did not forget what had been done to him. For 5 years, he nursed his rage, planning his revenge with the same meticulous attention he applied to his greatest magical projects. In 1374 Dale Reckoning, Halaster struck back against the Twisted Rune with devastating precision. He attacked Stardock directly, wielding magic that the undead arcanists, for all their ancient knowledge and dark power, could not counter. The details of the assault are fragmentary, pieced together from survivors' accounts and divinations performed in the aftermath, but the results were unambiguous. Priam and Rakisk, the Lick who had orchestrated Halaster's kidnapping, was utterly destroyed, his phylactery shattered, and his essence scattered beyond any hope of reconstitution. Other members of the Twisted Rune were killed or driven into hiding, their organization broken, and their ambitions reduced to ash. Halaster demonstrated that attempting to use him as a tool, to steal his knowledge, or bend him to another's will, would result in annihilation so complete that not even undeath could protect you. But revenge was not Halaster's only concern during this period. In 1372 Dale Reckoning, just 3 years after his rescue from the Twisted Rune, the Mad Mage received a most unexpected visitor. Mistra herself, goddess of magic and keeper of the weave, came to Halaster with a proposition. Elminster Aumer, one of Mistra's chosen, and perhaps the most famous wizard in all Faerun, had been inadvertently sent to the Nine Hells while defending the Daelands from Shadowvar invasion. He was trapped in Avernus, the first layer of that infernal realm, and even Mistra's divine power could not easily extract him from that place of damnation. Mistra offered Halaster a bargain that must have intrigued the Mad Mage deeply. She would attempt to cure his madness, to restore the sanity he had lost over centuries of exposure to the knot, and his own increasingly extreme experiments, if he would venture into the Nine Hells and rescue Elminster. For a wizard of Halaster's power and knowledge, this was a fascinating proposition. The chance to have his mind restored, to think clearly again after so long trapped in fractured patterns of thought, must have been tempting beyond measure. Halaster agreed. He entered Avernus, navigating that realm of endless warfare between devils and demons, using his mastery of planar travel to reach the location where Elminster was imprisoned. The rescue attempt, however, did not go as planned. Halaster was ultimately unsuccessful in freeing Elminster and was himself in need of rescue, requiring intervention by Halaster Silverhand, another of Mistra's chosen, to escape the Nine Hells. Despite this failure, Mistra kept her word. She worked her divine magic on Halaster's fractured mind, attempting to heal the damage that centuries had wrought. She managed to partially cure him. The madness that had defined Halaster for so long was reduced, though not eliminated entirely. For a brief period, the Mad Mage was able to think with something approaching clarity, to see the world through eyes less clouded by obsession and delusion. But there was an ironic coda to this divine intervention. Mistra, having extracted Halaster's madness from his mind, proceeded to blast Asmodeus, Lord of the Nine Hells, with that same extracted insanity. The god of sin and ruler of all devils found himself temporarily afflicted with the same fractured consciousness that had plagued Halaster for centuries. A fitting revenge for his realm's imprisonment of Elminster. How long Halaster's partial sanity lasted remains unclear from available records. The knot's influence was constant, always present in Undermountain's depths, calling to him, pulling at his consciousness. Given what we know of the knot's documented effects and the strength of its compulsion, it seems likely that the Mad Mage eventually succumbed again to the same forces that had claimed him initially, that whatever clarity Mystra granted him eroded over time, until he returned to his familiar patterns of unpredictable behavior and inscrutable goals. But for a brief window, Halaster Blackcloak knew what it was to think clearly again, to remember the person he had been before Undermountain claimed him. And perhaps that was reward enough for his attempt to rescue Elminster. Throughout his long existence, Halaster accumulated an arsenal of magical items that enhanced his already formidable abilities. Chief among these was the Horned Ring, a powerful artifact that allowed its attuned wearer to ignore Undermountain's magical restrictions. The dungeon itself prevented many forms of magic from functioning normally within its walls. Teleportation was unreliable or blocked entirely. Scrying magic produced false or distorted images. Attempts to plane shift or dimension door often failed catastrophically. But the Horned Ring granted Halaster exemption from these restrictions, allowing him to teleport freely throughout his domain, to scry with perfect clarity, and to move between planes as easily as walking between rooms. His blast scepter was equally formidable, a weapon of pure destructive power. This item allowed Halaster to cast Thunderwave as a 4th-level spell without expending any of his own magical energy. The save difficulty set at 16, high enough to challenge even powerful adventurers. The scepter also granted its wielder resistance to fire and lightning damage, protecting Halaster from common forms of magical attack. In combat, he could rain devastating thunderous blasts upon his enemies while conserving his own spell slots for more elaborate and deadly incantations. Other items in his collection included a robe of eyes, which granted him supernatural awareness of his surroundings and made it nearly impossible to surprise or ambush him. He possessed multiple staffs, each enchanted for different purposes, from simple staves of the Magi to unique creations of his own design. His personal library, scattered throughout multiple chambers in Undermountain's deepest levels, contained spellbooks and research notes documenting more than 1,000 years of magical experimentation. Knowledge that would be priceless to any wizard fortunate or foolish enough to discover it. But perhaps Halaster's greatest defensive asset was not any single magical item, but rather the network of clones he had created and hidden throughout Undermountain. These clone bodies kept in stasis through powerful preservation magic, numbered in the dozens at minimum, perhaps in the hundreds. Halaster had hidden them in secret chambers throughout the dungeon, protected by the most elaborate wards and traps he could devise, ensuring that even if adventurers discovered one cache of clones, many others would remain undiscovered and intact. When Halaster's current body died, whether through violence, accident, or simply the accumulated damage from his experiments, his consciousness would transfer to one of these waiting clones. The process took anywhere from 1 day to 10 days, during which Undermountain would be without its master's direct control. But the Mad Mage always returned, his memories intact, his power undiminished, ready to continue whatever work he had been pursuing before his temporary demise. This rejuvenation ability made Halaster functionally immortal within Undermountain's bounds. A foe who could be killed, but never truly defeated. An enemy who learned from each death and adapted his defenses accordingly. Some sources suggest that Halaster created thousands of clones, sealed in an icy crypt beneath his deepest lair, a vast repository of bodies waiting to house his consciousness should all other options fail. Whether this represents literal truth or exaggeration born from fear and uncertainty is difficult to confirm, but it speaks to the lengths Halaster went to ensure his survival. The paranoia that drove him to create backup upon backup, failsafe upon failsafe, so that nothing short of divine intervention could permanently end his existence. And through all of this, through centuries of conflicts and kidnappings, divine bargains and personal vendettas, magical experimentation and endless construction, Halaster remained bound to Undermountain, master of the greatest dungeon ever conceived, prisoner of his own obsession, forever caught between the genius that created wonders and the madness that consumed him whole. Section 5. The Spellplague and Soul Shattering. 1385 Dale Reckoning stands as one of the most catastrophic years in the history of Faerun. The year when the goddess Mystra was murdered, and the weave itself began to unravel. The assassination, carried out by Sirik, the mad god with the aid of Shar, goddess of darkness and loss, sent shockwaves through reality that no mortal spellcaster could have anticipated. When Mystra died, the weave that she had maintained and protected for millennia began to collapse. Magical energy running wild across the world in what would become known as the Spellplague. Cities vanished in bursts of uncontrolled sorcery. Entire nations were consumed by magical fires that burned without fuel or transformed into landscapes where the laws of nature no longer applied. Wizards everywhere felt the weave's death like a physical wound, their connection to magic severed or twisted beyond recognition. Deep beneath Mount Waterdeep, Halaster Blackcloak felt the goddess's death more acutely than perhaps any other living wizard. His connection to the weave was profound, his understanding of magic so complete that he existed in constant communion with the fundamental forces that shaped reality through his study of the knot. When Mystra died and the weave began its collapse, Halaster knew immediately what had happened and understood the implications with terrifying clarity. Undermountain itself, bound to the weave through countless enchantments and wards, through permanent gates and magical systems that had operated for more than 1,000 years, was in danger of catastrophic destabilization. If the weave truly collapsed, if magical energy ceased to flow in any predictable pattern, then Undermountain would tear itself apart, its levels collapsing into the depths, its gates opening to release every horror Halaster had imprisoned within its walls. Halaster could not allow this to happen. Undermountain was not merely his creation or his prison. It was part of him, bound to his soul through the knot and through centuries of obsessive work. To allow the dungeon to be destroyed would be to destroy himself. And even in his madness, perhaps especially in his madness, Halaster's survival instinct remained paramount. He immediately began working a ritual of staggering complexity, a spell designed to stabilize Undermountain's magical infrastructure, to create a localized pocket of order within the chaos engulfing the rest of the world. The ritual required every scrap of power Halaster had accumulated over more than 1,000 years, every bit of knowledge he had wrested from ancient texts and planar entities, every secret the knot had whispered to him in the darkness. But Halaster was not the only power that recognized the opportunity presented by Mystra's death. The twisted rune, though broken by Halaster's revenge 11 years earlier, had not been completely destroyed. Surviving members of that dark organization, still nursing their hatred for the Mad Mage, who had shattered their ambitions and slaughtered their leaders, learned of Halaster's desperate ritual through their network of spies and scrying. They saw a chance for revenge that would never come again, an opportunity to strike at Halaster when he was most vulnerable, when all his attention and power were focused on maintaining Undermountain rather than defending himself. The twisted rune struck at the worst possible moment, disrupting Halaster's ritual just as he channeled the full measure of his power into stabilizing the dungeon. The interference was catastrophic. The ritual, which might have saved both Halaster and Undermountain, instead went wildly wrong, its energies turning back upon the caster with devastating effect. Halaster's physical body was destroyed instantly, vaporized by magical forces that would have leveled mountains. But the damage did not stop there. The backlash from the failed ritual tore through Halaster's very essence, shattering his soul into countless fragments that were scattered across Toril and beyond. These soul shards, each containing a portion of Halaster's consciousness and memories, were blasted to distant corners of the world. Some landed in Waterdeep itself, drawn to the city that stood above Undermountain. Others fell in distant nations, in remote wilderness areas, in places where no human had walked in centuries. Still, others were transported beyond the material plane entirely, ending up in the outer planes or stranger dimensions, lost in realms where the normal rules of space and time held no meaning. Each shard retained some fragment of Halaster's awareness, some echo of his personality and power, but none contained enough of his original consciousness to reconstitute the Mad Mage in his entirety. The consequences of Halaster's soul shattering extended far beyond his own fate. Without the Mad Mage's presence and control, Undermountain began to change in disturbing ways. The dungeon did not collapse, as it might have without Halaster's partial success in stabilizing its core structures. But it became even more dangerous and unpredictable than it had been during his lifetime. Gates activated randomly, spilling forth creatures from 100 different planes. Traps that Halaster had carefully calibrated to test, rather than kill, adventurers reset themselves to lethal configurations. Areas of wild magic proliferated throughout the levels, zones where spells produced random and often catastrophic effects. Most disturbing were the visions that began appearing to sensitive individuals throughout Waterdeep and the surrounding regions. These were not simple dreams or nightmares, but vivid, detailed warnings sent by the scattered fragments of Halaster's consciousness. The soul shards, though separated from each other and lacking full awareness, retained enough of Halaster's knowledge to recognize danger and attempt to warn others. The visions showed threats to Undermountain creatures or forces that might exploit the dungeon's destabilized state to wreak havoc on the city above. They revealed hidden dangers lurking in the depths, ancient entities that Halaster had kept imprisoned through constant vigilance, but which now stirred in their prisons, sensing their jailer's absence. Those who received these visions often found them incomprehensible at first, fragmented images and impressions that made little sense to minds not conditioned by centuries of magical study. But over time, patterns emerged. Scholars and wizards who studied the visions began to understand that they were glimpses of Halaster's own memories, warnings transmitted through the soul shards in a desperate attempt to protect Undermountain even from beyond death. The Mad Mage, it seemed, could not let go of his obsession even when his soul was scattered across continents and planes. Among all the fragments of Halaster's soul, one shard landed in circumstances that would prove crucial to his eventual restoration. Flamstered received a soul shard that contained enough of Halaster's consciousness to understand what had happened and what needed to be done. The exact nature of Flamstered's relationship to Halaster remains unclear in the historical record. Some accounts identify him as Halaster's familiar, while others hint at more complex connections. Regardless of his true nature, Flamstered undertook a quest to gather the scattered soul shards and restore his master. This quest would span decades. Flamstered traveled across Faerun and beyond, following divinations and visions to locate the fragments of Halaster's soul. Some shards were easily retrieved, found in accessible locations and guarded only by minor hazards. Others required expeditions into deadly dungeons or negotiations with powerful entities who had claimed the shards for their own purposes. Still, others remained lost, hidden in places beyond even Flamstered's ability to reach, scattered across plains where the Spellplague had created barriers that could not be easily crossed. The years following Halaster's death became known as the Wailing Years, a period when Undermountain existed without its master's guidance. Adventurers who descended into the depths during this era reported hearing strange sounds echoing through empty chambers, wordless cries that seemed to emanate from the stone itself. Whether these sounds represented actual sentience in the dungeon's structure, or simply the acoustic effects of unstable magical energies reverberating through the levels, remains a subject of debate. Some scholars theorize that the Mad Mage's obsessive attention and the knot's influence had awakened some form of consciousness in Undermountain itself, and that without Halaster to give it purpose and direction, this nascent intelligence expressed its confusion through those mournful wails. Others maintain that the sounds were echoes of trapped magical energies, or the cries of creatures responding to the dungeon's destabilization. The magical chaos that gripped Undermountain during the Wailing Years made exploration more dangerous than ever before. Levels that had been relatively stable shifted their configurations without warning, passages opening and closing in patterns that defied mapping. Creatures that Halaster had kept confined to specific areas roamed freely, with beholders hunting through regions previously dominated by mind flayers, and demons battling devils in chambers that had once been carefully segregated. The elaborate ecological and territorial balances that Halaster had maintained through centuries of careful manipulation collapsed into chaos. Yet even in this chaos, certain patterns emerged that demand explanation. The dungeon's most dangerous levels, the depths where Halaster had pursued his most extreme experiments and imprisoned his most powerful captives, remained largely sealed. Gates to certain planes remained closed despite the general destabilization. This selective stability could indicate residual effects from Halaster's ritual, automated systems continuing to function even without their creators' direct guidance. Alternatively, if we accept the possibility of emergent consciousness in Undermountain structure, these patterns might suggest that the dungeon itself understood which portals were too dangerous to allow open, even in the Mad Mage's absence. The knot in the weave that wound in reality that had been at the heart of Halaster's transformation and power continued to pulse with chaotic energy, calling out to those sensitive enough to hear it. The lords of Waterdeep watched these developments with growing concern. Without Halaster to contain Undermountain's dangers, the threat to the city above increased exponentially. Monsters emerged from the yawning portal, and other entrances with greater frequency, forcing the city guard to establish permanent watches at every known access point. The magical disruptions bleeding up from the depths caused problems throughout Waterdeep, with spells failing unexpectedly in certain districts and magical items malfunctioning in patterns that suggested they were being affected by proximity to the destabilized dungeon. Some among Waterdeep's leadership proposed sealing Undermountain entirely, collapsing the known entrances, and attempting to isolate the dungeon from the city above. But wiser voices counseled against such action, pointing out that they had no way of knowing how many entrances to Undermountain existed, or whether sealing the known passages would simply force monsters to find or create new routes to the surface. Moreover, there was genuine concern that attempting to seal Undermountain might be interpreted as an attack by whatever intelligence or magical systems remained active in the depths, potentially triggering a catastrophic response. Instead, the lords increased their support for adventuring companies willing to descend into Undermountain and cull the most dangerous creatures, essentially continuing the policy that had been in place during Halaster's lifetime, but with greater urgency and official backing. These expeditions reported back on the dungeon's deteriorating condition, describing levels that seemed to be slowly collapsing or transforming into configurations that made no sense architecturally or magically. The adventurers spoke of entire sections of Undermountain that appeared to be attempting to remake themselves, though whether this represented deliberate restructuring or simple decay remained unclear. Throughout this period, Flamstered continued his quest to gather Halaster's soul shards. Each fragment he retrieved brought him closer to having enough of the Mad Mage's essence to attempt a resurrection. But the work was painstaking and dangerous. Some shards had bonded with the objects or creatures near where they landed, creating bizarre hybrids that possessed fragments of Halaster's knowledge and madness, but none of his control. These had to be carefully extracted without destroying the soul fragment in the process, requiring delicate rituals and precise magical surgery. As the decades passed and Flamstered slowly gathered more shards, the visions sent by Halaster's fragmented consciousness became more coherent and urgent. The scattered pieces of the Mad Mage's soul were somehow communicating with each other across vast distances, sharing information and coordinating their warnings in ways that suggested Halaster's consciousness was beginning to reconstitute itself even before the physical resurrection could be completed. This development gave Flamstered hope that his quest might actually succeed, that enough of Halaster's essence could be gathered to bring the Mad Mage back from the oblivion to which the twisted rune had consigned him. But even as Flamstered worked toward his master's restoration, questions lingered about what form that restored Halaster would take. Would the Mad Mage return as he had been, his madness intact, his obsession with Undermountain undiminished, or would the experience of having his soul shattered and slowly reassembled change him in fundamental ways, creating a new Halaster with different priorities and perspectives. And if Undermountain had indeed developed some form of independent consciousness during the Wailing Years, would it accept its creator's return? Or had the dungeon grown beyond its need for the wizard who had shaped it? These questions would remain unanswered for nearly 100 years, as the world slowly recovered from the Spellplague's devastation, and Flamstered pursued his patient, methodical work of gathering the scattered fragments of a shattered wizard's soul. Section 6. Return and Current Era. 1480 Dale Reckoning marked the beginning of a new era for Faerun and for magic itself. Nearly 100 years after her assassination, Mystra returned, her divine essence reconstituted through means that remain mysterious even to the most learned scholars of the divine. With the goddess's return came the restoration of the weave, though not in its original form. The new weave was different, changed by its time of absence, and by the reality-warping effects of the Spellplague that had ravaged the world for a century. Magic functioned differently than it had before Mystra's death, with some spells becoming more powerful while others were lost entirely, their patterns erased from the fabric of reality during the chaotic years. For Halaster Blackcloak, or rather for the scattered fragments of his consciousness spread across Toril and beyond, Mystra's return was felt as a sudden shock of awareness. The soul shards that had existed in isolation for nearly a century suddenly found themselves reconnected through the restored weave, able to communicate and coordinate in ways that had been impossible during the Spellplague's chaos. This reconnection accelerated Flamstered's quest dramatically, as the soul shards themselves began guiding him toward their locations, drawn together by the same magical forces that had once bound them into a single consciousness. The actual restoration of Halaster Blackcloak occurred sometime between 1480 and 1492 Dale Reckoning, though the exact date remains uncertain in historical records. What you can know is that Flamstered eventually gathered enough soul shards to perform a resurrection ritual of unprecedented complexity. This was not a simple restoration of life like the spells clerics cast to return fallen comrades. This was the reconstitution of a soul that had been shattered and scattered across planes, the reassembly of a consciousness that had existed in fragmented form for nearly a century. The ritual required components gathered from across the multiverse, power drawn from the knot in the weave itself, and sacrifices that history has mercifully left unrecorded. When Halaster returned, Undermountain responded immediately. The dungeon had continued functioning during his absence, maintained by whatever sentience or magical automation the Mad Mage had instilled in its structure over more than 1,000 years of obsessive work. But with Halaster's restoration, Undermountain awakened fully, its awareness sharpening, its defenses reactivating with renewed purpose. Gates that had malfunctioned for decades suddenly stabilized. Traps that had become predictable reset themselves into new and more deadly configurations. The entire dungeon seemed to exhale in relief, welcoming its master home after a century of absence. This synchronized response across all levels, simultaneously, strongly, suggests a deep integration between Halaster's consciousness and the dungeon's fundamental structure. But the Halaster who returned was not quite the same as the one who had died in 1385 Dale Reckoning. The experience of having his soul shattered and slowly reassembled had changed him in ways that observers have documented. Some accounts suggest he became even more unpredictable. His madness deepened by the trauma of fragmentation and the strange perspectives he gained from existing in multiple places simultaneously for a century. Others claim he returned with unusual moments of clarity, brief periods, where something of the old Hilather seemed to surface, bringing with him wisdom and power that the fully mad Halaster had never possessed. The fragmented nature of these reports makes it difficult to determine which characterization is more accurate, though both patterns appear in contemporary observations. What remained constant was his connection to Undermountain, and his obsession with the dungeon's continued existence and expansion. If anything, that obsession had intensified when you consider that each soul shard spent a century fixated on protecting different aspects of the dungeon. Each piece of his consciousness convinced that Undermountain's survival was paramount above all other concerns. The mathematics of their reunion becomes clear. When these fragments were reassembled into a complete consciousness, their combined obsessions reinforced each other, creating a Halaster even more devoted to his mad domain than the one who had created it. The current era, spanning from approximately 1492 to 1494 Dale Reckoning, finds Halaster Blackcloak firmly established once more as the undisputed master of Undermountain. His power in this modern age is staggering, representing more than 1,300 years of accumulated magical knowledge and experimentation. In the 5th edition Understanding of the World's Magical Structure, Halaster possesses abilities that place him among the most formidable spellcasters ever to walk Faerun. His magical capabilities in the current era are extensive and terrifying. Halaster can cast spells of the 9th Circle, the most powerful incantations available to mortal wizards, and he has access to his entire spellbook, rather than being limited to prepared spells like most practitioners of the art. This gives him unprecedented flexibility in combat and experimentation, allowing him to adapt to any situation with the perfect spell for the moment. His intelligence and wisdom are both extraordinary, granting him insight into magical theory that few can match, and an understanding of the broader implications of actions that extends far beyond the immediate moment. Perhaps most significantly, Halaster's rejuvenation ability has evolved into something even more remarkable than his original clone network. When his physical body is destroyed, Halaster now reforms automatically after 1 to 10 days. His consciousness transferred to a new body that manifests in a random location within Undermountain. This is not merely the activation of a prepared clone, but rather something more fundamental, a function of Undermountain itself. The dungeon has become so intertwined with Halaster's essence that it can regenerate him much as a living organism might regenerate damaged tissue. This observed phenomenon, the automatic reformation, without requiring pre-existing clone bodies, the integration with the dungeon's structure, the synchronized deactivation of gates during his absence, points toward a merger so complete that distinguishing between Halaster and Undermountain becomes increasingly difficult. This integration between wizard and dungeon has profound implications. When Halaster is killed, all gates throughout Undermountain deactivate, cutting off the dungeon's connections to other planes until the Mad Mage reforms. This demonstrates that the gates are not independent magical constructs, but rather extensions of Halaster himself, powered by his consciousness and controlled by his will. The dungeon's very structure seems to respond to Halaster's mental state, with passages shifting and reconfiguring in patterns that mirror his fractured thoughts. Based on these documented behavioral patterns, we can reasonably infer that Halaster and Undermountain have truly become one entity, that the Mad Mage is less a person inhabiting a place and more a manifestation of the dungeons, while given human form. Halaster's relationship with his apprentices in the current era is as complex and troubled as it has always been. The surviving members of the original Seven continue to occupy their holdings within Undermountain, pursuing their own obsessions while nominally serving their master's will. Archeria remains in Archeriadum on the 23rd level. Her transformation into a worm that walks complete, her experiments with transmutation, magic, continuing unabated. Trabriand still crafts his metal constructs, selling them to those willing to meet his price, while training newly recruited apprentices in the basics of magical theory. Jessiira Kestelharp, trapped in her bizarre state as a living wish spell, commands her army of sentient incantations from the citadel of the Bloody Hand. But Jessiira's situation is more complicated than simple imprisonment. There are indications in recent observations that she plots against Halaster, that her transformation into living magic has granted her perspectives and abilities that even the Mad Mage does not fully comprehend. As a sorceress rather than a wizard, Jessiira's magic came from within rather than from study, and her transformation into a wish spell may have unlocked potential that was always present in her bloodline. Whether she seeks escape, revenge, or something more elaborate remains unclear. But wise adventurers who encounter her recognize that she represents a wild card in Undermountain's already chaotic ecology. Beyond the Seven, Halaster has recruited new apprentices over the centuries, individuals drawn to Undermountain by ambition, curiosity, or the subtle compulsion of the knot in the weave. These modern apprentices, collectively known as Halaster's heirs, vary wildly in power and sanity. Some are genuinely talented wizards who believe they can learn from the Mad Mage and eventually surpass him. Others are already mad when they arrive, drawn to Undermountain because their fractured minds resonate with the dungeon's chaotic nature. Still others are unwilling captives, talented spellcasters kidnapped by Halaster and forced into apprenticeship through magical compulsion or threats against loved ones. Halaster's treatment of these modern apprentices follows no consistent pattern. He may ignore them for months or years, leaving them to pursue their own research without interference. He may suddenly appear to offer cryptic advice or demonstrate techniques they have been struggling to master. Or he may attack them without warning, testing their defenses, or simply acting on some mad impulse that makes sense only to his fractured consciousness. The constant uncertainty keeps the apprentices off balance, never sure whether their master is mentor, enemy, or indifferent observer. The Mad Mage's interactions with adventurers who descend into his domain have become legendary in their unpredictability. Halaster appears to parties of explorers regularly, sometimes offering assistance, sometimes posing riddles, sometimes attacking with devastating magical force. He seems to view adventurers as entertainment, test subjects for his experiments, or perhaps as pieces in some vast game, whose rules and objectives he has never explained. Some groups report that Halaster helped them overcome obstacles or warned them away from particularly deadly traps. Others describe sudden assaults that left their entire party dead or transformed into bizarre creatures. There are documented cases of Halaster forming what appear to be genuine attachments to certain adventuring groups or individual explorers. He has been known to spare parties that impress him with their cleverness or determination, allowing them to retreat from Undermountain with their lives and at least some of the treasure they sought. He has occasionally offered bargains, promising safe passage or valuable information in exchange for completing tasks elsewhere in the dungeon. But these moments of apparent rationality are always temporary, liable to end at any moment as some aspect of his madness reasserts itself. The question of what Halaster ultimately seeks in the current era remains one of the greatest mysteries in Faerun. His stated goals, when he bothers to articulate them at all, shift constantly and often contradict each other. He speaks of perfecting Undermountain, of creating the ultimate testing ground for aspiring adventurers. He claims to be conducting experiments that will unlock fundamental truths about the nature of magic and reality. He suggests that he is preparing for some future threat that only he can perceive, building defenses against dangers that have not yet manifested. Some scholars propose that Halaster's ultimate goal is simply to sustain Undermountain indefinitely, that the dungeon itself has become the purpose rather than a means to some greater end. In this interpretation, everything Halaster does, all his experiments and constructions, and seemingly random actions, serves the single objective of ensuring that Undermountain continues to exist, grows larger, becomes more complex, and more deadly. The Mad Mage, having bound his soul to the dungeon so completely that the two are inseparable, cannot conceive of existence without Undermountain. And so everything he does ultimately reinforces and expands his greatest creation. The evidence supporting this view includes his century-long obsession, even while fragmented, his immediate prioritization of Undermountain's stability during the Spellplague, and his complete inability to permanently leave the dungeon's environs. Others suggest something more disturbing, that the knot in the weave has fully consumed Halaster's consciousness, and now uses him as a tool to accomplish its own inscrutable purposes. In this darker interpretation, Halaster is no longer truly present at all. His personality merely a mask worn by the knot's alien intelligence, as it manipulates events toward goals that mortal minds cannot comprehend. The evidence cited for this theory includes the increasingly alien quality of Halaster's actions in recent years, choices that seem designed to maximize chaos and unpredictability rather than achieve any rational objective. However, this remains highly speculative, as distinguishing between genuine madness and external control presents obvious methodological challenges. There is also the possibility that Halaster has transcended human goals entirely, that 1,300 years of existence and his unique relationship with magic have transformed him into something beyond mortal categories of thought and motivation. He may be pursuing objectives that exist on timescales measured in millennia or across multiple planes simultaneously, playing games whose rules operate according to logic that human minds simply cannot process. In this scenario, what appears to be madness might actually represent a form of expanded consciousness, a way of thinking so advanced and multidimensional that it resembles insanity to those who cannot follow its patterns. This interpretation finds some support in his ability to survive and plan across a century of soul fragmentation, suggesting cognitive processes that exceed normal human limitations. What cannot be disputed is Halaster Blackcloak's legacy, the permanent mark he has left on Faerun, and particularly on Waterdeep. Undermountain stands as the greatest dungeon ever created, a labyrinth so vast and deadly that it has claimed the lives of thousands of adventurers over more than a millennium. It has become part of Waterdeep's identity, attracting treasure seekers and glory hounds from across the world, supporting entire industries in the City of Splendors, dedicated to equipping and supplying those who dare the depths. The yawning portal serves as a constant reminder that beneath the civilized city beneath the laws and order and culture, chaos waits in the dark, presided over by a mad wizard whose power rivals the gods themselves. For those who study magic, Halaster represents both inspiration and warning. His achievements in gate magic, planar theory, and the creation of permanent magical constructs are unmatched in recorded history. Spells and techniques he developed have been adopted by wizards across Faerun, advancing magical theory in ways that continue to pay dividends centuries after their initial creation. But his descent into madness, his transformation from gregarious archmage to monster, serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and obsessive study of forces beyond mortal comprehension. The name Halaster Blackcloak has become synonymous with genius and madness, intertwined so completely that they cannot be separated. Parents in Waterdeep tell their children stories of the Mad Mage to frighten them into obedience. Wizards speak his name in hushed tones, equal parts reverence and horror. And deep beneath Mount Waterdeep, in tunnels and chambers that twist through impossible geometries, Halaster himself continues his work, shaping Undermountain according to visions that only he can see, pursuing goals that only he understands, forever bound to his greatest creation and his eternal prison. The story of Halaster Blackcloak is not over. As long as Undermountain exists, as long as the knot in the weave pulses with chaotic energy in the mountain's depths, the Mad Mage will endure. He has survived assassination attempts, divine intervention, the death of a goddess, and the unraveling of reality itself. He has outlasted empires and outlived gods. And somewhere in the endless passages beneath your feet, if you stand in Waterdeep, he is watching, waiting, perhaps even now planning his next great experiment or constructing his next elaborate trap. You have now heard the truth of Halaster Blackcloak, the secret history that few scholars know and fewer still truly understand. From Hilather the gregarious archmage to Halaster the utterly mad, you have followed his transformation across more than 1,300 years. You have learned of the knot in the weave that claimed his sanity, of the apprentices he twisted and imprisoned, of his death and resurrection, and the century he spent as scattered fragments of consciousness. And now you understand that the Mad Mage beneath Waterdeep is more than just a wizard, more than just a dungeon master, but rather something unique in all of Faerun's history, a mortal who merged so completely with his creation that the two became one. A consciousness spread across levels and planes, bound to stone and magic in ways that may never be unraveled. If you found this deep dive into the lore of Halaster Blackcloak enlightening, if you enjoyed exploring the secrets of Undermountain and the transformation of the Mad Mage, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you these comprehensive explorations of Dungeons and Dragons lore, told in the relaxed, detailed style that lets you truly immerse yourself in the Forgotten Realms? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you faced Halaster in your campaigns? Do you have theories about the knot in the weave or the true nature of Undermountain? We would love to hear your stories and perspectives. Until next time, may your adventures be legendary and your knowledge of the lore ever deeper.